Welcome to Wolfpack for Lunch. This is actually our kickoff for the 2014-2015 school year. A little brief history of the program is we started this back in February. Our goal and intent is to promote and showcase subject matter experts and faculty and staff throughout the university. We do this in partnership with the Alumni Association. I'm Ashley Black, Assistant State Executive in Education. And so welcome. Our speaker today is Jessica Thomas. She leads up the Sustainability Initiative at the Poole College of Management. Prior to coming to NC State, she led initiatives at Duke University as well as UNC Jacksonville. So without further ado,
well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Ashley, for the invitation to join you this afternoon and for that lovely introduction. I'm really excited about this afternoon's talk, and thank you all for joining us as well. It's great to see some familiar faces, some of our alumni, some of our faculty and current students, and such strong interest in this topic, really looking at strategies and examples for how businesses are realizing the opportunity in sustainability. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Jessica Thomas. I'm the director of the Poole College Sustainability Initiative. We're one of the newest academic initiatives at Poole College, just a year old. And our focus is really on connecting faculty, students, and industry around sustainable business strategies with really four major strategic priorities. One, integrating sustainability across the curriculum, making sure that every one of our students at the undergraduate level and graduate level, I know some of you are here, understands both the challenges as well as the opportunities in sustainable business. The second is really focused on working with our faculty, some of whom I know I see these two are faculty who are here in the room today, on really advancing research related to sustainability and extending that research into industry. The third priority is really around working closely with our students, and I see some of our students here as well today, on identifying career opportunities and helping students connect with impactful careers. And the fourth is really what part of what we're hoping to do here today is advance sustainability in industry and makes a case for why sustainability is important to business practices. I am certainly, this is a topic that's very relevant to business and it's been very important to me for many years. I've spent much of my professional career focused on sustainability, looking at it from different angles, and so that's over 20 years now. It's hard to imagine. As Ashley mentioned, I started out my professional career as an engineer and as a product designer with a company called Leapfrog. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Leapfrog. It's an educational, interactive toy company, and I like to think of Leapfrog as really my first introduction to a triple bottom line business. We were focused on the social side, so developing innovative, interactive educational toys for children, teaching math, science, and reading, and eventually grew the company to be distributing millions of toys around the world. And also from that engineering perspective, brought in what we didn't call sustainability at the time, but thinking about resource efficiency in product design, in packaging design, and so starting to think about at that point, again, quite a few years ago, but the environmental impact of producing all of those toys. And finally, we were very focused on building a sustainable and financially viable business. And that model really helped us to build Leapfrog from when I started, was a 10-person startup, to the third largest toy company in the world when I eventually left. And so after that, I had a chance to actually move out here to the Triangle to study social entrepreneurship and environmental sustainability at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke. And as Ashley mentioned, again, I had a chance to work with a number of academic initiatives at Duke, at the business school at UNC, and now at NC State, focused on social innovation and environmental sustainability. So I've been told many times over the last year, since I've been at NC State, that I've essentially been working my way up to NC State, I think by a few folks in this room. So I'm happy that I've arrived, and I'm good. I love seeing all the red in the room. And so, next slide. So, as you probably read in the headlines, we are in trouble. This is a matrix representing some research that KPMG has recently published looking at what they call the 10 sustainability megaforces. These are drivers that will impact every business over the next 20 years. These are issues that are constantly, again, in the headlines, issues around climate change, the realities of declining natural resources, pressures on food systems, water, and the ecosystem. And these are all, as you, I'm sure, are aware, critical drivers in business and critical challenges that we need to be aware of and that businesses need to be aware of to be sustainable in the long term. I'll focus on two of those primary drivers in this system for the purposes of today's talk, and two that I think are really driving the rest. The first is certainly climate change, obviously, and climate change being the one global megaforce that really directly impacts all of the others, and that creates within supply chain challenges as well as price volatility, both risks, significant risks for businesses. The same KPMG report predicts that annual business loss related to climate change could range from 1%, which is significant, and that's in the case that business, industry, and policymakers take significant action now, to up to 5% and even more if we continue along the current track. There's also a new UN study released just earlier this week saying very decisively that climate change is already affecting our global economy and is likely to become irreversible if, again, we fail to act. At the same time, we're seeing unprecedented global population growth. Our global population is predicted to be 9 million in 2014. And again, this growth also places intense pressures on our ecosystems, on the supply of natural resources such as food, water, and energy. And at the same time, we're having this global population growth. This is a significant part of that is increasing our global middle class, which is accelerating the demand for products and services, and again, putting further pressure on our natural resources and our need to produce them. And another important factor in here is the urbanization piece, and that virtually all of that population growth over the next 30 years will be in urban centers and in our cities. And these cities will require extensive improvements in infrastructure, construction, water and sanitation, electricity, waste, transportation. And so these are all, I think, both present challenges for businesses, but also opportunities as well. And that's what we'll really focus on in today's talk. I wanted to highlight one of the initiatives in the Poole College of Management that's beginning to tackle and study some of these business risks related to climate change and related to sustainability. I mentioned two of our faculty, Mark Beasley, who leads the ERM initiative, and Scott Showalter, who's faculty in accounting as well, who is really beginning to study this interconnection and the idea of integrating operational sustainability and enterprise risk management to really look at corporate risk from a big picture perspective and how looking at the long-term viability of companies and the risk related to sustainability. And so what is this business opportunity? The way we talk about it at Poole College and the way I see it is really all about doing business in a way that balances short and long-term supply and demand resources, and in a way that understands the importance of impact on people throughout the life cycle of a product, as well as a business model that drives the bottom line. And looking at the opportunity in a way that each of these drives the other, and that's not drawing from the bottom line to implement sustainability strategies, but is actually driving the bottom line and improving a company's innovation, improving a company's efficiency, improving opportunities for new markets, new products, and driving innovation. At the business school, this is no longer the domain of fringe environmentalists or tree huggers, as it was when I was in business school and seen as very much an outlier and somebody who's kind of interested in not really core business strategy. Now this is really a part of the mainstream of business, and businesses are more and more seeing social and environmental issues as critical to long-term business success. And so how do we use business? How do we use business as a driver of sustainability? How do we use sustainability as a way to drive the business bottom line? So that's where we'll really focus on in today's talk, is looking at sustainability as opportunities for innovation, for better products that are more efficient, for ways to create new markets, to create operational efficiencies again, and to engage stakeholders across the supply chain. And again, the critical bottom line for business being the financial bottom line, so driving profitability. Harvard Business Review has published a report looking at essentially 5 stages of sustainability. So 5 stages that businesses can go through where they're driving innovation around sustainability at each of these stages. And identified opportunities to really innovate at each stage as they move along this spectrum. I'll mention a few examples of businesses that are innovating at each of these stages. The first stage is really looking at regulatory compliance and thinking about how, even at an early stage when companies are thinking just about conforming to regulations, how that can create an opportunity for innovation. Because environmental regulations vary country by country, city by city, and really can be vastly different around the world, it's really in a company's best interest to unify their operations so they can remain uniform and essentially abide by the highest standard to create efficiencies. HP learned this starting in the 1990s when they found through their research that the lead being used in many of their manufacturing processes and their equipment was toxic. And so they took steps to identify less toxic equivalents for their products and services. And so when a few years later, the European Union's Restriction of Hazardous Substance Materials Directive took effect, HP was already ahead of the curve. They didn't need to quickly invest resources in product innovation to comply with those regulations. They'd already innovated, and they were ahead of the curve compared to their competitors in that specific area. Stage 2 is really around looking for opportunities to increase efficiency throughout the value chain. And you can think of the value chain as essentially the entire process of producing a product or service, from material extraction to manufacturing, to operations, to the use of the product, to the eventual disposal or recycling of the product at the end of its life. And looking at opportunities to create efficiency in the value chain as a way to reduce the inputs, the natural resource inputs, energy inputs, water inputs in the value chain, as well as a way to reduce cost, fewer inputs, lower cost. And one example I'll mention here is on the operations side with UPS, when they implemented their right turn policy, which you might have heard about. And essentially the idea was to rearrange their routes so that they only turn left about 10% of the time. Obviously, turning left, the vehicles are idling longer, they're using more gas, and actually spending more time. And so this was a critical decision, especially for a logistics company. In 1 year, they were able to shave off 30 million miles from their routes that were already significantly streamlined at that point. And so this is the stage where many companies are today. And we'll come back to this stage, and I'll give you a few more examples of how businesses are innovating around this really value chain, efficiency and value chain sustainability. I would like to mention a few companies that are really starting to push the envelope around sustainability innovation, and really thinking about stage 3, which is much more focused on developing sustainable offerings or redesigning existing products and services to become more sustainable. And one company that I often like to highlight is Method Products. So this is a household cleaning products company. How many of you are familiar with Method Products? I have quite a few Method products in my house right now. But they make dishwashing detergent, soap, as many of you are aware, and they were really one of the first movers in the green cleaning products category. How many of you think of them as a green cleaning products company? A few. I mean, I think most of us think of them as great design, great products, and just very very compelling marketing strategy. But they were really one of the first green cleaning products companies to really start to think about what's their core tagline is people against dirty. And so obviously 2 meanings there, consumers who are using their products to clean their homes, but also they had a really strong focus from the very beginning of the business on eliminating ingredients that are toxic, that are harmful to people, and that are dangerous for the environment. And this has been a core part of their business model. And so they've been certainly innovating And this is interesting way to think about cleaning products, that they're actually quite dirty for the most part, but making cleaning products more clean from an environmental and health perspective. But they were also one of the first to innovate around the volume of the product, if you can think of it that way. They created the first double concentrate laundry detergent, which you've probably seen many other consumer products companies follow suit. And they recently introduced the 8 times concentrated laundry detergent. And what this has done from their supply chain efficiency is really incredible. Obviously, you can imagine that this significantly reduces the size of the packaging, reduces their transportation costs, and again, reduces their CO2 emissions throughout the supply chain. You're taking shipping smaller volumes of product, but still getting the same results, and certainly a lot less water involved in the process as well. And so, one example of really, I think, product innovation, and you've probably also seen recently that they've introduced these refillable pouches. And so it used to be you buy bottle after bottle of soap, and what you really wanted after you bought that first bottle was more soap, not necessarily another bottle. And so they introduced the refillable pouch, which uses a lot less material, again, fewer shipping costs, where you can essentially refill your soap or refill your dishwashing detergent. And I think this is a great example of companies really innovating on the product development side, but that has implications across the supply chain. Another part of that method model is they actually partner with a company called TerraCycle on recycling and reusing their packaging. And TerraCycle is, I think, a great example of a stage 4 company. And this stage is really where companies are pushing the envelope, really exploring new ways of doing business, looking at understanding how companies can meet customer needs in a different way. And how many of you are familiar with TerraCycle as a company? A few folks. So essentially, TerraCycle's business model is on developing new products from waste streams. What they're doing is they are collecting, for example, recycled juice pouches. My son produces a lot of juice pouches over the course of the week, and turning those juice pouches into bags. So those are an early version of their product iteration. And now more and more they're looking at innovations like taking used diapers and turning them into park benches. And so their entire business model is focused on using other companies' waste streams to produce new products and new materials, and thinking about creating more of a closed loop in the way that we consume products and make new products. And so I think this is a really, a very innovative approach and a completely new business model from ones that we've seen before, and really I think a company that's pushing the envelope and moving across the spectrum. Stage 5, as one of my colleagues likes to call it, is the Star Trek phase. So the stage where no one has yet gone before, but we know is coming. So what is the next innovation in sustainable business? Where are there companies that are really rethinking the assumptions in a similar way that TerraCycle did, and thinking that, okay, our inputs are actually trash, how can we use trash as the primary input in our business model, but are really even pushing the envelope further and thinking about completely new business models, completely new different ways of doing things, really taking away a lot of the assumptions that we have about the way business works. And so it's exciting to think that that stage 5 company is probably at a startup stage right now, might be somewhere here in RTP looking for funding, getting started. And so we're really excited to see about what's next along the spectrum of sustainability. Another area, so in addition to looking at sustainability really across that cycle, and looking beyond just new business models, but is also looking at sustainability is driving new corporate forms. And so how many of you are familiar with B corporations? It's really helpful. We're gathering data here, so thank you for participating in the survey. So only a few folks. So essentially B corporations are companies that have been certified by a nonprofit called B-Lab. And B-Lab has developed essentially B standards, a B rating system focused on social, environmental, performance and accountability and transparency. And so only companies that meet the highest level on those different metrics can be certified as a B corporation. And so there are nearly 1,000 B corporations today. This has grown significantly since B corporations were introduced just a few years ago. including over 2 dozen B corporations here in North Carolina. Not only is B Lab certifying corporations, so certifying corporations as B corporations, but they've also developed a model for state-level legislation that creates a new corporate form. And so this corporate form, the B Corp, is essentially designed to allow companies to write their articles of incorporation in a way that says that they will do business in a way that includes all stakeholders, not just shareholders. It includes the environment in their business decision, and that's really looking at balancing social, environmental, and financial impact. And this is very different from traditional business models and traditional articles of incorporation, where the focus is really on maximizing shareholder value specifically, and B corporations taking a much broader stakeholder and environmental value perspective. And so this really allows companies to operate in a completely different way, to make decisions really balancing that triple bottom line, and having that be a core part of their business model. And so B Corporation is actually passed in the District of Columbia and 26 states already to date, and those states include Delaware, where more than 63% of Fortune 500 companies are already incorporated. There are actually 14 states that are moving B Corporation legislation right now through their legislatures. And so I think this is a really exciting new corporate form that's really gaining traction, and that's really providing businesses with a foundation to really integrate this triple bottom line. Unfortunately, I don't see any hands with the question, but we're not currently working on B Corp legislation here in North Carolina.
Can you interpret the question?
Yes, absolutely.
Will B Corp, will incorporation incorporated as a B Corp, is the anticipation of be insulated from shareholder suits around objectives that are not necessarily maximize shareholder value? Is that the nature?
That is the origin of the corporate form. Essentially, really started with Ben & Jerry. When Ben & Jerry was acquired by Unilever, essentially there was a competing offer that was a smaller offer from a company that was much more in line with Ben & Jerry's values, but based on their articles of incorporation, they essentially had to take the Unilever offer because it was in the best interest of their shareholders. And so this really came out of that acquisition and exactly out of that goal. So I wanted to mention here again another initiative that NC State has launched. So this is our Design and Innovation Cluster that's focused on exploring just these types of innovative business models, just these types of innovative products and services. And this is a collaboration between the Poole College of Management and the College of Design, with some involvement from the College of Engineering as well. And our faculty, Rosanna Garcia from Poole College, as well as Christian Holges, hope that's a correct, Holges, thank you. Tough name, Christian has. I like to call him Christian. But really focused on looking at taking a very cross-disciplinary approach, a team-based approach, a problem-solving approach to addressing global challenges with really a sustainability lens in many ways. And so, again, this is, I think, another example of how we as a university are committed to really exploring what I think is really the leading edge of business, and in this case, really the leading edge of innovation. The next area I really wanted to focus on, so thinking back to stage 2 in that HBR progression of stages, and really thinking about where many businesses are today, which is really looking at supply chain management, sustainable supply chain management, and deriving efficiencies, deriving cost savings, reducing water, energy, and other inputs in the system, looking at ways to improve reputation, corporate reputation, improve brand perception, really looking at a whole range of opportunities where companies can really understand and create transparency across their supply chain. Obviously, many businesses have supply chains that are dispersed around the world, and this makes it really difficult for them to really monitor and control those inputs across the supply chain, as well as issues like worker conditions. But as you can see here from research from NBS, the Network for Business Sustainability, there are a whole range of opportunities and benefits to companies that can really get a handle on their supply chain and understand that supply chain from a sustainability perspective. And so I'll give you a couple examples really focused on the three primary drivers in the supply chain. The first one I really wanted to focus on is the recent example of Apple Computers and Foxconn. And so how many of you have heard of or are aware of the issue around labor and human rights with Apple supplier? One person. Okay, excellent. So a couple people. Okay, so I'll go into a little bit more detail here. So Foxconn is one of Apple Computer's major suppliers in China for a whole range of products, including iPads like this. And so in recent years, Foxconn has been involved in a number of controversies related to how it manages the company's employees. There have been, in the past, numerous allegations around poor working conditions. And in 2010, there were a series of suicides at the factory linked to low pay and long shifts that lasted up to 36 hours. In January of 2012, about 150 Foxconn employees threatened to commit mass suicide in protest against their working conditions. And in October of that year, the company admitted that it had employed 14-year-old children in its factories, and the legal working age in China is 16. Initially, Apple said that it's not responsible. I mean, obviously, you can imagine what Apple's supply chain looks like if you go, back along the supply chain. Said it was not responsible for the working conditions really across its supply chain. It had no control over what Foxconn was doing. That's an independent company, and it's just one of our suppliers. But the backlash really mounted against Apple Computer, as you can imagine, as consumers, those of us who use Apple computers and who care a great deal and want to be informed about where our products come from and the conditions in which our products are made. And so there were calls for boycotts from consumer groups and NGOs, and eventually Apple had to act, was forced to act. They, in late 2012, hired the Fair Labor Association, which is a collaborative effort between business, NGOs, and universities, including NC State, that's really focused on combating labor practices. And so they hired FLA to conduct a series of audits across their supply chain, including Foxconn. And FLA conducted close to 400 audits and really pinpointed, as the Foxconn example indicated, a number of significant issues throughout the supply chain related to labor and human rights. And so at this point, with the public pressure, with the evidence, with the data, with the information, which I think is a critical part of this puzzle, Apple was able to put into place, in partnership with FLA, essentially a code of conduct. And that would really commit the company to transparency in the supply chain, to commit them to good working conditions within their suppliers, to protecting human rights, and to eliminating child labor. And so Apple and many other companies that have signed these types of codes of conduct are in process, so are developing, creating more transparency in their supply chain, tracking more of the information about, again, labor and human rights issues along the supply chain, and really, I think, advancing this issue significantly. So still a long way to go, but obviously this was a critical issue for Apple's reputation and certainly for their bottom line, and they're working very hard to address those issues. Another area I wanted to focus on is really energy as a major input in the supply chain. Obviously, fossil fuel markets are likely to become more volatile and unpredictable because of growing energy demand and certainly increasing regulation around energy related to climate change. As I'm sure you know, energy is a critical input into business, really along the supply chain, from manufacturing to transportation to operations. And there are estimates that world energy demand will increase by 53% between 2008 and 2035. And so this is an enormous increase, given significant existing pressures on limited non-renewable energy sources like fossil fuels. And so one example I wanted to give around the company that's really innovating around energy in its supply chain is Walmart, which you might not think of as a sustainable business. How many of you think of Walmart and sustainability? So Walmart has actually made some significant sustainability commitments, long-term and short-term commitments. One of its long-term commitments around renewable energy is that the company will be 100% powered by renewable energy. This is a long-term vision goal for Walmart. They've actually set into place some very specific and tactical short-term goals looking at a deadline of 2020 and made two significant commitments. One is that they will increase their use of renewable energy by 600% over 2010 levels, and that they will reduce, or they'll increase their energy efficiency by 20% over 2010 levels. And so you might imagine for a company that is laser focused on its margins and laser focused on its bottom line, does this make a lot of sense? Well, this is, I think, a critical business decision from the Walmart perspective, because these two commitments combined are anticipated to generate more than $1 billion annually in energy savings for Walmart once they're fully implemented. So you can start to see the bottom line impact of these decisions and why a company like Walmart might want to make such a significant investment in renewable energy. The next example and the next area I wanted to focus on is really water. And so in addition to energy risk, which has been, I think, has been recently a significant risk that business is becoming more and more aware of, water risk is also a critical risk for businesses when you think about water shortages, growing water shortages, declines in water quality, and price volatility related to water. And so for Levi's, they wanted to better understand a range of sustainability-related risks in their supply chain. They were looking at climate change, water, and energy, and the impact on a single pair of Levi's 501 jeans. They took a product life cycle assessment approach to this analysis, so really looking across the life cycle of a pair of Levi's, so looking at everything from material extraction, which you can see up there, so actually, picking the cotton in the farms, really across the life cycle, so through the production of the jeans, through the manufacturing, the assembly, the distribution, the use of the jeans by us, the consumer, as well as the disposal of a pair of Levi's 501 jeans. And they were looking at the inputs at each of those stages along the life cycle, or the inputs in energy, in water, in natural resources, as well as the outputs at each of those stages. What were the outputs in the form of waste and emissions into air and water? And what they learned from that life cycle assessment actually really surprised them. How many of you can, anybody want to take a guess about how many gallons of water go into producing a single pair of Levi's jeans across that life cycle? 100, 200? It's actually 800 gallons of water go into the entire life cycle. You can imagine how much of this you can see, but hopefully you can see the major points of a pair of Levi's 501 jeans. And what they learned really surprised them, and that's that 49% of that water was used during the cotton production process. And so obviously a very water-intensive process producing cotton. And 45% of that water was used when customers washed their jeans. And so only 6% of that water was used during the manufacturing process, which is really traditionally where a company sees its sphere of influence. But in this case, based on the results of that life cycle assessment, Levi's really took responsibility for its supply chain. It joined a network called the Better Cotton Initiative to reduce water use, to reduce the use of pesticides in the production of cotton among their suppliers, to improve labor standards in their supply chain, and to improve profits for the farmers who were supplying their cotton. On the consumer side, Levi's focused on customer engagement, and so really on educating their customers about the environmental impact of the products that they purchase, not just their Levi's 501 jeans, but really across the apparel that consumers purchase. And they actually implemented new care tags for their jeans and for a lot of their products, making recommendations like washing their jeans in cold water, and if it's bearable, washing jeans every other week instead of every week, which seems to be the habit for a lot of people. And so really empowering consumers and really empowering their entire life cycle around really driving, in this case, water efficiency, but other broader issues around the social and environmental impacts of their products. And so these are just a few examples of, I think, both challenges in the supply chain, again, as well as opportunities to innovate. We wanted to highlight, again, here another initiative within the Poole College of Management, our supply chain resource cooperative run by Rob Hanfield and Clyde Kreider. And we're working with our students and working with companies to really explore and develop solutions to some of these challenges, looking at issues like life cycle assessment for companies, looking at issues like labor and human rights in the supply chain and creating more transparency around those issues, and looking at issues around sustainable food systems as well as a broader set of supply chain management issues. And so where I really wanted to focus on next is think about, okay, so here are all these challenges that we're confronted with as businesses, and here are all these opportunities. How do we actually implement these strategies? How do we actually take advantage of these opportunities? And a critical piece of that implementation is stakeholder engagement. And so this is where I wanted to focus on next, is really thinking about how to engage the people side of that sustainability solution, and certainly starting with CEOs. Increasingly, CEOs agree that sustainability is a strategic and an integral part of their business. This lovely chart here is the result of a recent McKinsey study that asked CEOs to rank 13 core activities, including sustainability. Almost 50% of these CEOs surveyed said that it was one of their top 3 priorities. And I think that one of the reasons that that's the case is, as you've seen today, sustainability really cuts across functional areas, it cuts across departments, it's a driver that can add value across the supply chain, across the business model, and it's a critical driver for business. And I think CEOs are really starting to recognize that. The challenge is, many people don't know how do we do this? We know there's an opportunity here. We know there are these tools, these models. How do we start to integrate these practices, these processes, these strategies within our business model? And so that's where that's where we as employees come in. And that's really the next stakeholder group that I wanted to focus on, is really employee engagement in sustainability. So CEOs, as I mentioned, are increasingly on board with integrating sustainability into their business models. More and more companies are creating chief sustainability officer roles, but really there is an opportunity to identify, design, and implement sustainability innovation across a company. And really there's an opportunity to empower, I think, all employees to think about their role, whether it's an operations role or a marketing role or a finance role, to really think about the role that those employees can play in driving sustainable innovation within the business model. This is the result of a survey that Ernst & Young did to really look at the top sustainability trends in business. And you can see the third trend here, which is really focused on employee engagement. And they identified, they looked at different stakeholder groups and who was the most committed to sustainability within the business model. Employees were second after customers. So customers being the most committed, engaged stakeholder group, and employees within companies being the second most engaged stakeholder group. And you can imagine, hopefully, those of you who are here today, why that is. More and more people want to work at a company that's integrating sustainability into their business practices. More and more people want to stay at those companies, so it's a great way to attract and retain employees. And more people want to think about the work that they're doing as having not just a positive impact on the company's bottom line, but a positive impact on the social and the environmental bottom line as well. And this is really how we think about sustainability within the Poole College is really integrated across disciplines. It's really something that touches on every industry, that touches on every functional area within business. We've actually taken an approach to, as I mentioned earlier, identifying opportunities to integrate sustainability topics, sustainability examples, project opportunities, opportunities to bring businesses in the classroom really across courses. So whether it's a marketing course or a finance course, an HR course, or an accounting course, really thinking about the intersection between that traditional discipline and sustainability. And we've actually launched a grant program to provide our faculty with funding to develop sustainability-focused modules within existing courses. And we've provided 9 grants over the last 2 years. I actually see one of our faculty who received a grant in the back of the room there. Beth, I don't know if you want to say a word or two about your course and the work that you've done around integrating sustainability into your course.
Well, actually, I'll just say something very quickly. It ties into your Apple and Foxconn example, the human rights piece. So I teach HR courses, and what I did was actually build some modules in to discuss with students who are going to be the future leaders of companies that are outsourcing and offshoring work about labor rights practices in other countries. And so it worked out. The grant actually helped make all that happen, which is helpful to us. And I think the students, kind of for this slide, are very engaged in these topics and want to learn more.
Great, thank you. So that's Beth Ritter, one of our faculty in the HR department. Thank you, Beth. And the final stakeholder group I really wanted to focus on is customer engagement. And so let me ask all of you, if you knew that purchasing a certain product or service would help the planet, would you pay more for that product or service? Some hands. So based on a recent survey done by Nielsen, so a majority, 55% of those surveyed said they would be willing to pay extra when companies are committed to positive social and environmental issues. So this is an important issue for many consumers around the globe. And you can see some variation by region, but really I think a consistent, significant number of consumers anywhere in the world. And so let me pose another question. Would you pay the same price for a product that has a social and environmental impact? If you had a choice between perhaps a company that wasn't focused on these issues and a company that was, where the product was of equal quality and equal price. And so I think this is really the opportunity for businesses to identify opportunities for innovation in the design of products, the design of business models, innovation in the supply chain, and to create products and services that can compete on an equal footing when it comes to price and quality, but where there's that competitive advantage, where they're really building these practices, these principles, these ideas into their business model, and this being a way, as you can see, for this consumer group, for a significant consumer group, to really create a competitive advantage, as well as to drive the bottom line. And wanted to, again, here, highlight another one of our initiatives within the Poole College of Management, our Consumer Innovation Consortium led by Stacy Wood and Colby Reed, who are working on research, understanding consumer perceptions and preferences around specifically sustainable apparel. So again, among a broad range of consumer innovation issues, but again, another example, which I think is personally exciting for me to see so many of our initiatives and centers really thinking about the intersection between their existing research and what that sustainability lens, what that sustainability opportunity presents. And more of the businesses that they're working with asking these questions and looking for solutions. So the final area I wanted to focus on, if there's time, and I want to make sure to leave time for questions. Can I see kind of a show of hands for questions, just to give me a sense of how much more time I have? Any pressing questions? Okay, yes?
The second item you mentioned, I mean, what's really the driving factor behind the chief financial officers being involved in that? Is it really the profitability, or is it the ecosystem, et cetera? What's your...
I'll be honest, I think it is the profitability. I mean, I think it is that business case for sustainability. I think they see it as an opportunity, as I've described here today, to drive the bottom line, to drive innovation, to engage employees, they see how it cuts across many of their other strategic priorities and how it can help drive those other strategic priorities. So I think certainly the bottom line would be a critical one for CEOs, but I think they see a lot of the other benefits of integrating these strategies. Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
thank you.
I'm telegraphing, we have somebody who actually works with, who coaches CEOs here, who might be able to provide a little bit more insight.
I think businesses are kind of looking across the whole spectrum today, saying, what is viability of the business going forward? And what role does everybody play in it? It's just not the CEO that's driving. It's got to be everybody in the organization.
Absolutely, but certainly that leadership is critical, and I think there's, again, a growing number of CEOs who see that opportunity. So the last area I really wanted to focus on is around sustainability reporting. And again, we come back to this Ernst & Young report looking at the major sustainability trends, and that's really the top one that they identified. And this is something that cuts across everything that we've talked about today, but which is really the idea of how do you measure, how do you quantify the environmental and social impact of business. We've got really sophisticated models for quantifying the financial impact of the bottom line, for looking at a company's financials, but as you can see from their research, really companies are still developing the tools to be able to measure and quantify the environmental and social impact of business. And so this is an area where, again, I think Poole College and NC State is really leading. And this is an example I wanted to give about a team of our accounting faculty who've been working with Bacardi Limited to create an innovative new set of sustainability metrics for Bacardi to measure their environmental and social impact. And so we've actually got one of the researchers here who's part of that team and leading that innovation, Gilroy Zuckerman. Gil, I don't know if you want to say a few words about your work with Bacardi.
Do I have an hour?
2 minutes.
Coincidence is, about 3 years ago, 5 of us in the county thought that accountants ought to be more involved. This also relates to the CFO question. Accountants ought to be more involved in the measurement process in the area of sustainability improvements. How are we going to measure that we're doing a better job? So we began to write a grant proposal with the Institute of Management Accountants. Coincidentally, Bacardi Limited had developed a new metric, and they were looking for faculty to kind of validate what they were doing. And we got together. So we began to study what they were doing. Just a little history first. I thought maybe we were going to get into this with the Ernst & Young report, but if you go back 10 years, it was difficult to find anything going on with companies in the area of sustainability. 5 years ago, far less than 50% of the top 500 S&P 500 companies were reporting on their sustainability efforts. 2013 were above 70%. So there's tremendous movement in this area to report on what we are doing, but this is a short period of time. And companies are scrambling for measurements. They started off relying on absolute measures, total amount of electricity used, total amount of water consumed. And then there are problems with that if you have healthy growth. Technology, you'd like to get your electricity down, but if you're growing, probably your total electricity consumption is going up. So companies were experimenting with efficiency measures. Let's become more efficient. We understood that the efficiency measures that they were using weren't very good. Energy per unit of output, energy or water consumed per dollar of revenue. And efficiency improvements would cause that metric to improve. But there's so many other things that don't have anything to do with the efficiency that would cause that number to improve. Turned out that Steve Harvey, who is person we were working with Bacardi, just recently retired Director of Global Environment, Health and Safety. He was charged to come up with a metric, and he came up with a very interesting metric that only he and a couple of us understood. No one else in Bacardi really could understand the math. It turned out after we looked at it, it was a nice application of flexible budgeting. So that's why that was in the title. So we improved the way this is measured, but it's a much more reliable measure that really zeroes in on efficiency, and you can learn a little bit about it. But if I could just say one more thing, because in addition to getting the grant from the IMA and working with Bacardi and bringing our research to our students in the classroom, this past fall, I mentored 3 students, and they worked on an extension of what we were doing in this paper with a bottling plant in Jacksonville, Florida for Bacardi, and really advanced the metric because the devil is in the details. You know, you can have a metric, but when you begin to implement it, there are some challenges. And the work that the students did, we were invited to present at the National Conference of the Institute of Management Accountants this past May, and 2 of my 3 students were able to attend and present. These were undergraduate students, and so I mean, that excites me more actually than that. That's important, but undergraduates working on this, and we hope to get a public. We've gotten a couple of papers published, but we hope to publish another paper with these 3 students. 2 now are in our master's program in accounting. And if you want to learn more about the metric, other companies are looking at this metric. Managing innovation is sometimes a challenge. We view this metric as new, innovative, better than what's out there, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the world sees it, and but little by little other companies are contacting us and beginning to use this metric to measure their efficiency improvements. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And so hopefully you can see, I think, just 2 examples in Beth Ritter and Gil Zuckerman of our faculty who are really, I think, pushing the envelope on integrating sustainability into their classes, into their research, bringing students, getting students engaged in the process, and working with businesses to really change the way businesses operate. And so these are, I think, just 2 examples of over 24 of our faculty who are working on issues really across the range of sustainability and issues. I also wanted to highlight a university-wide partnership that I think really highlights our expertise in sustainability, not just in the Poole College of Management, but really across the colleges at NC State. So NC State is the newest academic member of a group called the Sustainability Consortium. And the Sustainability Consortium is a network of over 100 corporate partners, NGOs, and 5 academic institutions. You can see the 5 academic institutions from around the world represented here, including NC State, really working to develop a single global platform for measuring and reporting on product sustainability and creating consistency across industries, across product categories, creating a more uniform model for really measuring the triple bottom line, for measuring social and environmental impact. And I think this is really exciting because it brings the expertise from across our colleges. We've got faculty from the College of Natural Resources, faculty from the College of Textiles, College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, as well as Poole College, who are working with the Sustainability Consortium on developing these metrics. And I think really represents the expertise, the broad-based expertise we have across the university, as well as the commitment to really, as we like to say, think and do, and really change the way that businesses operate, change the way that businesses are practicing. And so just wanted to start to close up my presentation, our talk today, really thinking about why we should care about sustainability. Because really, at the bottom line, if we are wrong, let's say this is a big hoax, the bottom line impact is still, there's an enormous opportunity for us to really change the future of business, to change the way we live and the way we operate in the worst case scenario. So just a little food for thought there. And just wanted to close out with a few opportunities for you to connect with the Poole College Sustainability Initiative and to get engaged around some of these issues. We host an industry speaker series where we bring executives from around the world who are leading sustainability in their companies to speak on campus. And we'll have Bruno Sarda, who's the CSO at Dell, on campus for a talk in late November. So I'll have my mailing list sign up here at the end of the talk. And so if you're interested in hearing more about Bruno's talk and other speakers in our industry speakers series, I encourage you to sign up on our mailing list. And finally wanted to mention a number of programs that we manage, but to really connect specifically people across North Carolina who are interested in learning more about best practices, about innovations, asking questions about challenges that they're having within their businesses, with a network that's really focused specifically on North Carolina, and that's the North Carolina Sustainability Connection. And so this is a website, a series of social media platforms. So we've got over 1,000 people from across the state, and where we're sharing on a regular basis stories about sustainability and innovation across the state, and helping to connect people to identify opportunities for partnership, to identify opportunities for best practice sharing, and really to drive sustainability across NC State. So again, if you're interested in finding out more about the North Carolina Sustainability Connection, I encourage you to sign up on our mailing list and to hear more about the work that we're doing across Poole College, across NC State. We'd love to get you involved and really think about how we might be able to work with you to really address the issues that you're tackling within your business. And so just want to close by saying thank you all so much for your time. We do have, I think, a few minutes for questions if any additional questions have popped up, but thanks so much for your time and attention and for being such quiet eaters. I didn't really hear anybody eating, so I appreciate it.